We need to talk about this.
It's a bit of a cliche to say, why doesn't the mainstream media care about this country or that war? But if there is any truly ignored war on Earth, it's the one going on in Sudan right now.
Yes. Okay, so here's the thing about Sudan. Sudan has been in chaos for a very, very long time because there was a certain man that used to live there. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say his name on YouTube. Osama. You could fast forward a decade to the beginnings of South Sudan, which only became an independent country in 2011.
Since 2023, Sudan has been suffering from complete state breakdown, and owing to its massive population of over 50 million people, making the current crisis not just the making of another failed state, but the largest humanitarian crisis on Earth.
Yeah, we're not talking about, a nation with just 10 million population or under. I mean, 50 million. That is really serious. And we've been hearing about this, at least I've been hearing about it since 2023. I know the conflict has been occurring for 2 to 3 years now.
In 2025, it was the country with the highest number of people facing famine, of internal refugees, and the most mass death. Beating out, not to use another cliche, these wars you might be a little more familiar with.
That's how I first started hearing about Sudan. Well, first of all, like I said, I heard about the conflict, but how bad it's really getting because I would see it under comment section when it comes to talking about Israel-Palestine or Ukraine versus Russia.
To fully understand the crisis, you need to understand how Sudan got to this point. But first, let me just try to share how awful Sudan's civil war is in under 6 minutes.
There is some clear resource struggles going on here. There's definitely a geographical issue here. Don't forget that Sudan historically was usually pretty tied to Egypt. That changed obviously with Sudan's independence after they were let go by the British Empire. When was that? All the way back in 1956. Now, I gotta admit though, I do not know everything about Sudan. I don't know a whole lot about Sudan, so I'm excited to watch this video.
Chain of events started when longtime dictator Omar al-Bashir was ousted after months of popular protests, triggered by economic collapse. Weighing into pressure, the armies called into the capital to defend him instead turned on him in April of 2019. They forced him out, giving the military power for a few months to go through a transitional phase. 2 military sects held power together, the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces, a paramilitary and business empire which grew out of the Arab supremacist Janjaweed militia, which, by the way, translates in English to devils on horseback.
Damn.
The SAF was headed by Abdel al-Burhan, while the RSF was led by General Hamdam Dagalo, better known as Hemedti, also known to al-Bashir as My Protector. His career has been made through helping the Sudanese government crush rebels, controlling Sudan's gold exports, and sucking up to the president.
I think some other things that need to be considered when it comes to the Sudan situation is they're in a very geographical, I don't know how else to explain it. It's a hellhole. The makeup of the state is literally a powder keg. I mean, look at the situation. They're obviously a majority just in the Sahara Desert. Not only that, but they're pretty much completely reliant on the longest river on Earth, and that is the Nile River. I mean, just look at this population density. I mean, basically people are only living in the capital city. There's just clearly a severe lack of resource distribution going on here.
After the transitional government, the 2 men which ran these militaries, big surprise, vied for control of the country against each other,
Classic.
Rapidly degenerating Sudan into a civil war which broke out in April 2023.
Bro, literally classic. It's been going on since Alexander the Great died and all his generals fought for his empire.
The main disparity was over the creation of a joint army. Al-Burhan wanted it done by 2 years, while Hemedti wanted it done by 10. Naturally, they started shooting at each other to solve this debate.
Jeez.
Now the SAF controls the east, Nile River, and coastline, posturing itself as the true government, while the RSF controls the west, including a region known as Darfur. Launching a campaign
we've heard about Darfur
for either total control of the country or to separate as its own state.
I'm sure he's going to get into it, Darfur specifically, but something I'm keeping my eye on is this strange border up here in the north. I can't remember who was talking about it, but the reason for this, is it here? There's a part that Sudan and Egypt argue over. where this is like a no man's land that is claimed by both. Like both nations don't want to claim this territory because if they claim that territory, then they're basically losing this other unclaimed land. Like there's this kind of fight between Sudan and Egypt for this land up here. That's why it's not a perfectly straight line. I believe that's still going on to this day.
River and coastline posturing itself as the true government, while the RSF controls the west, including a region known as Darfur, launching a campaign for either total control of the country or to separate as its own state. The details aren't really hashed out yet. You
could say that again. And one thing we learned about that population density map this RSF state is it would be very small population-wise.
Its own state. The details aren't really hashed out yet. The subsequent fighting has torn the social fabric of Sudan apart. At least 500,000 have died, with 15 million displaced, overwhelming refugee camps, and 25 million suffering from hunger as farms and food stockpiles are deliberately burned. In a country...
Yeah, I'm wondering what's going on with Ethiopia, another neighboring country. Those are all neighboring countries that we need to talk about here. Obviously, Egypt, Ethiopia, Eritrea.
Country made up of 40% children, 90% of them are out of school. This is total collapse. Sudan has seen many civil wars in its history, but none reaching into its major cities. This time around, Sudan's capital and cultural center, the Tri-City area of Khartoum, has seen clashes and airstrikes, so much so that Al-Burhan has had to flee to Port Sudan. When fighting couldn't be done
Yeah, so they're not technically a landlocked country. They have obviously a couple, I don't know if it's 100 miles of coastline or something along here, along the Red Sea. Another thing I'm keeping in mind, bro, Sudan would probably be a wonderful country to travel to. Obviously, nobody does it really. There's not a very big tourist country, but Sudan has the most pyramids in the world. But it's been completely unstable probably since its inception back in 1956, to be quite honest. I bet you it goes all the way back because that's always how these things go. The British leave, they draw some crazy borders, and then there's just been fighting ever since.
Between these groups, the armies switched to civilians, indiscriminately bombing hospitals, schools, markets, and residential areas. Much of the fighting, though, is centered around Darfur, a notoriously arid land which has traditionally been Sudan's poorest region. There, the RSF has won victory after victory, receiving aid through a corridor it captured to East Libya.
Speaking of another state that's been in chaos, I'm not sure how it is now, but just a couple years ago, they were basically a failed state. A lot of people considered it a straight-up failed state where there was a bunch of slavery going on, people being sold into slavery. I don't think it's gotten much better because I haven't heard about it, so Libya's in their own messy situation.
Sudan has had a troubled history of race relations. Many elites have declared Sudan an officially Arab Islamic country, sparking decades.
Yeah, I forgot to mention this. That's on me. That's on me, bro. I'm cooked. I should have mentioned that pretty early on. That's a huge factor for why Sudan was so chaotic for a very long time there, especially when they were still South Sudan. But this is literally the divide that you can see throughout all of Africa here. South of, as soon as you get out of the desert, things get a bit more Christian, Protestant. Obviously, in the desert, they're a bit more Islamic. Not even a bit more, a lot more.
Of unrest and conflict between them and the darker-skinned, mainly Christian people of the South, culminating in South Sudan's secession in 2011. More recently, though, has been the government's and RSF's fight against the non-Arab inhabitants of Darfur, a place literally meaning home of the Fur.
Yeah, this just seems, I don't know. It's kind of crazy. Like I said, Sudan is always in chaos, it feels, definitely for my entire life.
This is an ethnically mixed region of Fur, Masalit, and Zaghawa peoples, along with many nomadic Arab tribes, many of which moved in the 1980s.
I think there's a lot of people to learn. There's a lot of people that are learning just by studying this conflict that it doesn't matter where you are as a nation, racism is everywhere. And literally neighbors and neighbors. You find that all over Africa. Look at Rwanda. You obviously have the situation here in Sudan. People are judged based off skin color, even if They're just a couple of miles down the road. That's literally that, and it happens everywhere, and it's still happening.
Tension in the region over land rights, along with approval from the Bashir regime, culminated in a genocide of the native Africans by Janjaweed forces in the 2000s. A scenario that, since the most recent breakout of war, has started again. Capturing Al-Fashir, which was a regional hub for the displaced people of Darfur, would mark a huge victory for the RSF. For 18 months, they sieged the city, cutting food and medical supplies, building a wall of dirt around the city,
barrier.
And shooting anybody who tried to escape.
Yeah, the satellite imagery that's occurring out of this country, that's getting insane. I think that's part of the reason why this is not being covered up this time. And the more into the future we get, the more we're really going to see some of the horrors that occur in Africa. I think for a long, long time, they've been shielded from us. As the freedom of information is, getting better and better, as satellite imagery just constantly updating more and more fast, getting updated and things like that. I mean, we're gonna really see. This is not the only place in Africa that some really bad things have happened.
On October 27th, 2025, they finally captured it, starting what would become the bloodiest few weeks of the year. The mostly Arab soldiers went through the city, systematically torturing and killing all inhabitants over the age of 10. This is a group whose members call for the extermination of all black skins from Darfur.
Yep, we were just talking about that. Isn't that crazy? It's actually more crazy to me that people don't understand how often this happens in other countries, in the same country, even though they've been in the same country for decades and decades already now.
Shouting that women will soon have Arab babies, and who've posted these atrocities all over social media.
So the fish would eat them? The northern state, you will head there only for the women to grow. This is pretty classic stuff, sadly. I mean, historically, this is just... It's sad that this is literally still happening. In 2025, about to be 2026, this is still... We're still focused on literal ethnic cleansing. Like, that is still on so many people's minds. You read about it in the history books. It's like, okay, yeah, of course they were talking about this 5 centuries ago or 6 centuries ago or 2,000 years ago, but dang, it's still a very clear thing.
It is an attempted ethnic cleansing of Darfur. Tens of thousands died with its capture, a fact only known because of the piles of bodies seen from satellite imagery. In a city of this size, that means at least a tenth were killed within weeks of its capture. A speed of mass death not seen in the modern world since the Rwandan genocide.
We were going to talk about Rwanda. Yep, this is giving me a lot of Rwanda vibes. The similarities between, honestly, just the darker skin. Bro, it's so crazy. It's just disappointing. I don't know. It's like, damn. We're really on this still.
Now, it is in all honesty, more likely than not Sudan will collapse. At least it will collapse in its current form, with the West either formally seceding like South Sudan or creating a shadow government that basically acts as its own country without going through the increasingly useless motions of trying to become a UN member state. How could a country get so bad to the point where nobody has the power to stop what will likely go down as one of the worst mass killings of this decade?
Oh, yeah. Probably of the century. I mean, it's going to be up there.
Modern Sudanese history has been a cycle of military rulers, people getting tired of them and their despotism, overthrowing them in popular riots, only to end up with another military ruler. This has happened for 3 cycles, making up 52 of the almost 70 years of independent history.
Wow.
These chunks were the rules.
Look at how huge this red chunk was. That's crazy.
Of Ibrahim Aboud, Jafar Namiri, and Omar al-Bashir.
See, that's when things get really chaotic. That's the weird thing. Like, it's so messy, but you find it all over the world. I mean, that's why I mentioned Libya a little bit earlier. Why is Libya currently in chaos? Well, ever since we got rid of Gaddafi, it's just been a mess over there. It's like when you get rid of these the strongman rulers, whether they're military rulers or dictators or authoritarians, the country falls into chaos. And then things, then that's when things get even crazier. Like you might have an insane person at the helm, but that person is going to keep things stable enough. He might have horrors happen to certain sides of the country, but then once that guy goes down, then the horrors are happening everywhere. Another one that we might talk about is Saddam. Likely, we got rid of him, and that created a huge power vacuum in Iraq and Syria. And then an organization rose up and caused a bunch of chaos about 10 years ago now.
Respectively, each with a couple guys after them in the transition phase to the next military government. Sudan's current crisis is over who gets to lead the fourth.
The sad thing is that the world's governments have sometimes a lot more of a problem with some of these authoritarian like if they're not following the rules and if they're not following, what the rest of the world's governments want them to do, then they come in there and they axe them and they cause absolute chaos ground level. And that is a big issue, like Gaddafi with Saddam. Like obviously the U.S. government did not like Saddam and they didn't like Gaddafi. And for several reasons, whatever it being, maybe they see more of a threat when the current leadership of a certain country is not following the rules, Not to get all Joker here with me. I'm thinking of that Joker quote. As long as everything goes according to plan, then even if the plan is horrifying, it's just got to go according to plan. So sadly, this might not necessarily be the case, but I think a lot of governments around the world see a bigger threat from authoritarian and a dictatorship than absolute mass chaos, because the mass chaos won't affect the U.S., for example. Even if ground level it's horrifying in Sudan, it's not going to affect the U.S., but
the first two dictators basically had the same trajectories. They both came to power through a coup, led a government based on military over civilian rule, centralizing that rule around their personality and brutally put down rebellions and protests.
That's what they do. They're very, very good at that, keeping the order.
General Ibrahim Aboud was part of the Islamist coalition, while Colonel Jafar Namiri led the leftist one. Instead of tribal governments, to both of these guys, progress was going to come through the Islamization of Sudan. As a result, the defining political problem for most of Sudanese history was what to do with the South.
Weirdly enough, they obviously did not want to lose South Sudan. This was probably, sadly, this is happening in a lot of places around the world. It's going to be a lot easier to rule over your country if you're just a single religion, if you're just a single ethnic group, if you all look the same, single culture. It's when you have these highly diverse societies that obviously things go really bad. Combined with other problems like lack of resources, that's the thing. You can be a highly diverse society, but when you're in a situation like Sudan is, geographically speaking, it's going to get rough.
Christianity was a pre-colonial religion of the people who lived here.
Remember that Ethiopia is it's the second adopter of Christianity in the world. They've been Christian far, far longer than a lot of European countries.
Mountainous and jungly land of the region prevented large-scale Arab or Islamic migrations. The primary solution the northerner elites thought of was to integrate it into a larger Islamic Sudan.
Yeah.
The first
it's for sure, like, faith is like one of the biggest things, I would say, as like if I'm just an African dictator trying to control all of my people, make sure no chaos breaks out, I would say the number one priority is to get everyone on the same page religious-wise, that's probably number one, then culture. Those are probably the two biggest.
Constitution of the country already so divided when it was written for an explicitly Arab-Muslim nation. Both then tried to Islamize the South, and both faced organized military backlashes in two different civil wars. What's ironic is that part of the reason Aboud was ousted was because of fatigue the war brought, and part of the reason Namiri came to power was because he negotiated the end of that first war. Namiri then went back on that and did what the Islamist coalition couldn't do, create an officially Islamic Sudan, and he did it overnight. enforcing
This is the left-wing guy that he showed earlier?
Sharia with one presidential decree, again seeing organized resistance from the south. So for the first 5 or so decades of independent Sudanese history, the defining motivating force of the military governments was to keep the South in the country through mostly violent means, killings and burning villages. The waves of war would kill and expel.
So, it does come down... I'm sorry to bash the British, but it does come down to the British and the way they drew borders, doesn't it? It always does. And to be fair, sometimes it's the way the French drew borders. Sometimes it's the way the Europeans drew borders and they just decided to leave. Yeah. They did not do a good job. That's clearly the case. I don't know how much they really knew about these lands. You would think they would have had people like, I don't know, surveying the land. Okay, so there's a Christian majority in the south, but there's a Christian minority in the south, and then there's an overwhelming... Well, I actually don't know what the majority minority is, but I'm pretty sure that, yeah, he said the Christian minority. And then there's an overwhelming majority of Islamic people in the north. Whose idea was it to be like, yeah, just put them all together. It's fine. Just put them all together.
Millions.
Can't go wrong,
Mass
right?
killings, which would be history-defining for most other countries, were just a part of the long history of these wars. What didn't help the peace was the discovery of oil in the south, which would represent a great help to the cotton-dependent nation. The national refinery to process it would
look at where that's positioned, like just firmly in between the north and the south here.
Built near Khartoum, rather than in the south where it was originally planned for, and the main port to export in Port Sudan.
I would assume, now that we're learning about this, because you always got to think, why are we hearing about this? I always think that, personally. And I would definitely encourage everyone watching this video to think, why am I hearing about this conflict? There's got to be something going on. There's a reason why. There's got to be certain forces that want me to hear about this conflict. When it comes to South Sudan, I couldn't help but think that back in the day, back in 2011 and earlier. I'm like, why out of all the chaos in the world, and especially the chaos in Africa, why are we hearing about South Sudan? I don't know if I'm just jaded, but it looks like that's all I needed to see. I mean, there's more to life. There's plenty more reasons why governments do messed up things besides just oil. But oil's a big one. Oil, it's not just about the oil all the time. It's a big one, though. So I'm wondering now because I got this jaded outlook a little bit, it's like, oh, is that why we help South Sudan get their independence? And we just so cleanly allowed them to be their, recognized basically internationally overnight. Or not overnight, but, because there's a lot of countries that have been fighting for, recognition throughout the world for decades now. South Sudan got it like that. I'm wondering, is it because of the oil? Is it because we're like, hey, you become independent? We'll grant that to you, but that resource, that's going to be ours.
Get it here, a pipeline would have to be built across the country, keeping the South dependent on the North for economic growth, of which it saw almost none, since no oil was exported until the 2000s.
Jeez.
Also planned was the Jonglei Canal project to transfer water from the marshy south upstream to the north. The government promised foreign investors Sudan would have a green revolution with this project, having more arable land than the rest of the Arab world combined. Southerners protested for the rights to their own...
Yeah, I mean, they are very lucky, though they are, obviously they're pretty cleanly, not even cleanly, they're I wouldn't say they're smack dab in the middle of the Sahara Desert, but they got a lot of Sahara Desert. They do have, well, they had even more. They had more greenery, obviously, when they had South Sudan territory, but they do have that Nile, and they're not completely landlocked.
Oil revenue and water resources. So the government promised development projects for the South, none of which were kept. In fact, the entire canal project was scrapped when the conflict intensified. This second bout of fighting would begin the longest civil war in African history, ending in the breakup of the country. The main resistance was the Southern People's Liberation Movement and Army, led by John Garang. Originally, they wanted to found a new Sudan, which was secular, democratic, and socialist, and actually had some northerners who were opposed to Islamic rule join it. The government was able to convince America to fund its campaign against these socialist...
What did I say? Why do you think we did that? I'm going to guess there was some resource exchange involved in that. America's like, all right, we'll help you. But we're going to get some of them, we're going to extract some of those resources.
Agitators, while their funds came from communist Ethiopia. But after decades of fighting, the SPLM started explicitly calling for separation from the North. What changed for them was the start of the third military cycle.
Jeez.
Namiri was ousted in 1985. An ineffective administration couldn't keep power, only to be...
So yeah, keep in mind, this is still like Cold War's happening. It's wrapping down, but yeah, it's the 80s. That's why Ethiopia's communist.
...couped by the National Islamic Front. In charge, al-Turabi and al-Bashir. The new NIF government would do just as the others had done, continue fighting the South and crushing their political opponents. But just 10 years after they took charge, the NIF split, not into ideological sects, but over who should be in charge. Before that, al-Turabi's most significant addition to history was being chummed.
I wasn't sure if he was going to talk about it. That's why I wanted to mention it. I thought, dang, that was like one of the only pieces of knowledge that I knew that I was ready, like a card, like a damn dark magician. I thought, like, okay, this is the extra information I'll be able to provide to this video, but I guess not. He did his research. This channel here
comes with Bin Laden and getting Sudan put on America's state sponsors of terrorism list.
Bin Laden stayed there for like 5 years. In the 90s, there's actually an interview. One of the only interviews, maybe the only interview, at least when Osama was extremely wanted. I think it was a British reporter or an American. I don't even know, but there is an interview of him in Sudan talking about his claims and what he wanted. And so often, obviously, after 9/11, so often the media would reference that interview from the 90s. You just see so much footage from that.
Ending all American aid to the country. Long story short, as the economy waned under sanctions, al-Bashir and the National Congress Party would take charge, marking a slowdown of the war with the South. For one reason, al-Turabi was the one more concerned with pushing an Islamic Sudan south. Secondly, the war was no longer affordable. Too many human and fiscal resources were going towards it, while sanctions were weighing heavy on the government. Thirdly, this new oil provided a huge incentive to end the war, to get it going. And last, al-Bashir focused his military administration on another region, Darfur. During the Second Civil War with the South, fighting spread to the west as al-Bashir viewed Darfur with the same contempt that many viewed the South with. See, throughout the 1980s, a flow of nomadic Arabs came into the region to escape
Chad?
a decade-long war between Libya.
Chad and Libya. This is called the Toyota Wars, I believe. They fought using Japanese Toyotas. Something I know about this war, I believe it's the Toyota Wars. There was a bunch of mines, I believe, that Libya had. I believe there's a bunch of mines over here, and they'd realized that if they went fast enough, if they went fast enough on their Toyota Helixes, they were, to be exact, the brand was Toyota Helix, I believe. If they went fast enough over the mine, it wouldn't explode until they were safe enough. You had to go like, I don't know, 50 or 40 miles an hour, or maybe it was like 60, 70, 80 kilometers an hour. So obviously the front tires would trigger the mine, but they would perfectly clear it by the time it actually exploded. And don't ask me why I know that.
Libya and Chad, which, by the way, in its final act, concluded with the Great Toyota War.
Okay. Dude, he knows everything. He knows everything. I can't provide any new context.
Libya's dictator, Muammar Gaddafi, had planned on expanding his kingdom.
You got to talk about the regions. You got to talk about everybody in the region. You can't just focus on Sudan. You got to talk about Libya, Chad, Egypt, Ethiopia, Eritrea eventually is going to get its independence, but right now we're still in the 80s.
Down into Chad and eventually the entire Sahara. To help with this, he set up training camps around his enemies. Darfur's unpoliced Wild West was a great staging post for his fight against the Chadian Hissène Habré. But a mix of refugees, weapons, and a constant stream of racial supremacy doesn't usually end up great for the local population. Though the two groups had coexisted for decades before, even commonly marrying into each other's families.
Wow.
That didn't last when the drought came. Then, tensions boiled over between native farmers and the nomadic herders over what little water supplies remained. What followed was complete breakdown, to the point where the police had to beg for fuel so they could do their routine patrols.
Jeez.
And it was around this time when devils on horseback started to float around in
Well, those look like camels, not horseback, but
relation to these new Chadian professional fighters. When Gaddafi failed to take Chad, many nomadic Arabs stayed in Darfur. Years of Arab oppression went by before they revolted under the Sudan Liberation Movement and the Justice and Equality Movement. Fearing the region would end up like
this video did a great amount of research. This is very props to Hoser here.
South Sudan, al-Bashir empowered the Janjaweed to do as they pleased, burn villages and kill locals en masse. Because many in the forces aren't paid, they've been incentivized to loot as much as they can, leaving behind empty apartments, offices, and shops, leaving refugees to swell in makeshift tent cities in the suburbs.
I mean, people forget that's a OG thing here, is you get to just, hold on, what is this image?
Darfurian genocide saw the deaths of at least 500,000 people throughout the Second Civil War, an atrocity which Hemeti played a key and personal role in, and one which
oftentimes how they would pay people historically as well. It's like, well, I can't pay you, but just raid whatever you want. Just take whatever you want. We don't care. I mean, to be fair, that's what the Vikings were doing all the way back 1,000 years ago to the British Isles. It's like, hey, get on this boat. We're not going to pay you, but you're going to take a crap load of things and come back and being rich. And that was the number one selling point to go over here and do horrible things.
Also made al-Bashir the first head of state ever to be indicted by the International Criminal Court for his role in masterminding it. As the military shifted its focus here, it left the South to negotiate their way out of the whole mess. Al-Bashir was open to it, and in 2005 they signed the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, outlining the post-war divisions of wealth and power, as well as giving the South the option to secede by 2011. Part of the reason, the NCP viewed the South as a distinct people, rather...
That's a good move diplomatically. It's like, they probably try to just make it work with the South, make it work with this very different, sizable minority in your country, and at a certain point, it's like, okay, you just gotta let it go. You gotta let them go there, do their own thing, because it's getting way too complicated, and you'll be able to run your own country that's more of a monoculture a lot better if you just let them go.
Than a vacuum to be filled. Another, the American government pressured the country into it by promising to lift their sanctions if they gave the Christians freedom, which did not end up happening after news of the Darfur genocide broke. In 2011, with a nearly
Bush did a lot of wild things, if that was not clear. He did a lot of wild things, and seems like everyone forgets that. I think there's a lot of people that forget that.
99% margin, they voted to become independent. However, in one agreement during the war, the South would be defined as this line, the three original provinces, but in this new CPA, they would allow South Kordofan, Blue Nile, and Abyei to join as well, creating a disputed border that lasts to this day.
Yeah.
Kind of. Sudan doesn't really have any borders right now.
Yeah, you see that in basically every single strategy game mod that I play. That's like a modern day. I play so many different types of these games on my Drew channel, and Sudan has always been drawn in chaos. And Sudan, and sometimes you literally see this independent western side Sudan that we're drawing here today.
It didn't help that they agreed to split oil revenues 50-50, but around 3/4 of oil reserves were found in the south. So before and
Sudan's
after
cool
independence, the two halves again fought over the border, especially over the oil-rich province of Abyei.
Like I said, this really feels like a perfect, it's like the stars align for a nation that would be absolute chaos, which, as he's been going over the history, you can see that we're not lying. Like, this country, this nation has been chaos for decades now.
Leading to more deaths, displacements, and a harsh version of Sharia being implemented in the north, a version shaped by al-Bashir. He said there would be no more question of diversity now that the South is gone. A pretty bad foreshadowing as to how he viewed how he wanted his country to run.
So because he got rid of the South, he's like, hey, everyone else, get out or I'm going to make you get out.
While the South pretty much devolved into ethnic slaughter as soon as it got independence.
Yeah, it's definitely not the place
between the
you want
end
to be.
of the war and the South's independence was the only time Sudan really had an economic boom, as it used oil revenues to invest into education, healthcare, and infrastructure. Look at this graph of Sudanese foreign exchange earnings.
Wow.
The biggest thing here was oil, with gold barely making the same dent. 95% of foreign exchange and 60% of government revenue was tied to oil. Al-Bashir had also built a patronage network based on this oil revenue.
I think you might get into it because this video is so well researched, but you got to think of the bigger picture here. What regional powers do you think would really benefit for Sudan to not have all this oil? And I'm not talking about the U.S. at all, actually. I am actually not talking about the U.S. here. There's lots and lots of countries that the number one export is oil, and they're very close to Sudan. They're very close to Sudan, and they would love for Sudan to not have a ton of oil and not have a complete monopoly over this oil and not ever find a way to get it together. We'll see if he names drop some of them, but it is very fascinating to think about some powers in the region that does not want... I mean, we saw how much money Sudan was making and exporting, how much oil they were making, and now they're not anymore. Very curious. Was that a bad thing for some other oil nations in the region? I wonder.
Again, see the crash. Where subsidies to basic goods were given to the Sudanese middle class, bribes and development projects were given to business and local elites, and funding to private security forces were all dependent on these fields.
So once oil
he also
collapsed, it was
siphoned
over?
billions to overseas bank accounts for himself.
Of course.
Thus,
of course.
after the loss of this chunk in 2011, he was screwed. From its peak of $10 billion in 2010, foreign exchange earnings fell to around $300 million in 2016, 3% of what they were. Al-Bashir then tried to ramp up pipeline costs to Port Sudan, which the South Sudanese president responded with murder-suicide, ceasing to transport all oil through the pipe. When that was resolved and it really dawned on al-Bashir how little sources of foreign revenue he had left, he institutionalized the Janjaweed, rebranding them as the RSF and allowing them to do whatever they could to make money.
You back people up into a corner, and that's what happens.
Basically,
I mean, they're going to do some really messed up things.
They privatized this militia group. They exported soldiers to the Yemeni civil war to make some money, got into construction, trading weapons, but most importantly, started gold production. Especially after they captured the massive Jebel Amir gold mine in Darfur. Big shocker, this didn't replace Sudan's lost foreign exchange, and as an import-reliant country, losing their reserves would result in a, what we can say now, country-ending crisis.
Jeez.
In 2018...
It's funny how, it's not even funny, but it's just weird how well money works to neuter people. Does that make sense? You can literally take that dog out of them if you give them enough money. When things were going well, when the country has money, it's like, oh, well, there's no use in just, oofing my population. I want a stable population. Let's all make money. Once you remove that, and this is for countries and as well as just individuals, it's solo people. Money will sadly, money is bad in a lot of ways, but it does a really good job of stabilizing certain countries and certain people. If you give them economic opportunity, then they're less likely to commit crime. Obviously, I'm talking about on an individual basis now, not on a country level. But I don't know why this guy's just popping into my head. I'm thinking of Conor McGregor. I'm thinking of a lot of fighters, actually. A lot of famous people that got famous because of fighting. Once they get enough money, it literally slowly takes that dog out of you. That dog, that hunger that you had when you're young and you're coming up. And slowly as that bank account goes up and up, you start kind of relaxing a little bit. You're like, I don't need to be this aggressive, or I don't gotta do all this, yada yada. But once, and then when you move the money away, and sometimes the dog comes back out.
His patronage network formally collapsed when he ended subsidies to bread and fuel.
Jeez.
Nearly tripling the price of food for the average person, starting the protests which ousted him, taking us back to where we started. The loss of South Sudan broke al-Bashir's patronage system and left a bloated military with nothing to do. Attempting layoffs would threaten the regime, as many young, military-trained men would suddenly be out of work. To give you some perspective, roughly 70% of the government's spending went into the army or private security groups in 2016, while 2% went to education and 1% went to health spending.
That's not great.
Throughout this whole thing, the RSF, likely seeing the writing on the walls, created their own streams of revenue to stay independent from the central government. A far ways from Hemedti's humble beginnings as a camel trader, he now controls the region's mines and oil refineries, cementing a literal business empire in the desert.
Wow.
Their most important connection is with the UAE, which is the world's hub of gold refining.
Here we go.
And trading. It's been reported that they've sold hundreds of millions of dollars worth of gold to the Emirates through Hemedti's family company Al Junaid, and that the Emirati government has funded the paramilitary with smuggled weapons and aid through the eastern Libyan corridor.
So it looks like I needed to swap oil with gold, but that was the country that I was thinking of here, the UAE.
Of course, they officially deny all of this, but the Emirati business interests in the country are too great. It's one of the biggest gold-producing regions on Earth, and by placing a bet on the RSF winning the war or seceding, they can keep growing their position as the world's gold superpower. They also rely on Sudan for food imports, as it was an al-Bashir program to sell some of Sudan's farmland to many Middle Eastern
Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Qatar, the UAE
powers for their own food security, seeing what a lack of it could lead to.
Yeah, the Arab Spring. That was a big one.
Keeping Sudan's...
It's crazy the Arab Spring did not bring more to the region. The Arab Spring did not do all that much.
Semi-functioning is just in the interest of the Emirates. And according to some experts, if they withdrew tomorrow, there's a good chance the war would end real quick. Also involved in the war are Russia's Wagner Group, also betting on the RSF to win to protect gold supplies under the Mero Gold Company. And on the other side, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Iran, Ukraine, and the Russian government, who would all like to see some sort of stability in what they view as a geostrategically important region. Despite all their atrocities, the RSF still wants to project themselves as a force of democracy and peace to gain governing legitimacy, in a world where you don't really have to go through these motions anymore. In 2025, the RSF came together to declare a government of peace and unity, drafting a constitution for what their new country may look like. And although there's not really another government on Earth who buys this delusion, basically saying...
Envoys from France and China echoed that view, with Chinese Ambassador Fu Kong saying the move risks increasing the fragmentation of Sudan. A British ambassador also expressed deep concern over the development, and controlled territory in Sudan are unhelpful for the cause of peace and security in Sudan.
By the whole Western world, there's also not a government who really cares much to do anything about it.
I really wonder, so it seems like this might be pushed and the vibe is generally okay that this stuff is being talked about here in the West, because maybe the U.S. is not super involved in it. I mean, they got to be, let's be real. The U.S. is probably somewhat involved in a little bit of everything around the world. Like, they're at least, they got, I'm not saying they're taking action, but, the U.S. views every single country. There's there's a certain team that's designated to watch what's happening here and here. And possibly there's, this is an interesting, we're allowed to talk about this here on YouTube. And I'm just saying in general on my TikTok algorithm, like I'll see things about Sudan all the time. And I think interesting because things kind of funny because I mean all the other bad things you don't hear about, but why are we allowed to hear about this one? It sounds like maybe the U.S. is kind of just not involved that much. So, and in fact, some of our enemies are involved. Not China though, I guess, but Russia. I mean, Ukraine. They did mention Ukraine. We're cool with Ukraine, but we are allowed to talk about this because maybe there's some forces that we don't really like. So it's like, yeah, go ahead. We'll push that out to you.
Meanwhile, sitting in the southern Nuba Mountains, a remnant of a past war can be found in a new form. Distracted by the civil war, the SPLM has attacked and set up a little republic of New Sudan, comprising about 500,000 people. They've started their own English language schools, made their own court system outside of Islamic law, and have started the fight for a Western-style secular democracy. It's a reminder as to how far Sudan has gone in its current crisis, that the issue the government has spent almost its entire existence trying to stop has just gone ahead because nobody has the capacity or care to squash these southern rebels.
You'd be surprised how often this is happening all around the world, where there's just like a state that's in chaos. Like you might look at it on a map and it looks like, oh, that's just Sudan. Like if you pull up a world map and you just see Sudan when you look at Sudan. But in reality, like he said earlier in the video, he's like, there are no real borders here. Sudan doesn't even have real borders. That happens quite often and a lot. I mean, that's been going on in Myanmar for a while now, for years, since the pandemic. I just mentioned Libya. It's been very chaotic over there as well. I think we tend to think, especially when looking at maps, like, oh, everything, these are all these different organized states and they have their different organized heads of state. No, there are absolutely territories on Earth that are just in complete mass chaos.
Unfortunately, there's just not that much care to go around for what is almost certainly Sudan's largest crisis in its existence. Not much care for the increasingly nihilistic people living there, leaving behind no governing structure for society, and unless you're the Emirati Sheikh, not much care from the outside world as well. If you
the last thing I want to say,
enjoyed this video and are a long-time viewer but haven't
definitely subscribe. Hosier's always been a really good channel. I've really liked seeing his career blow up, starting off as just like a country ball channel, and now he's blowing up and he's making such a big impact on the world, so I love that. Definitely check this guy out. But the only thing, with that said though, I do want to say, the internet has a problem with this, and it's been a problem for a very long time. They'll take a big viral video about a big viral topic like Sudan, and they'll take 100% of this video by fact. Please continue to do your own research in Sudan, on Sudan. Continue. This is a general vibe that can get you into the topic, but continue to do a lot more research. People will watch this one single video, which they are. They're just watching this single video because this video got like 1 million views. I think this is the most watched Sudan video, or at least it's in the top 5, I'm thinking. And they just take this as pure fact. Please continue down and keep doing your own research, because this is what happens a lot of the time, is one video becomes super viral, everyone watches it, they take every word that is said in that video by fact, and they store that in their head, and they think that's exactly how it goes, and that's how misinformation spreads throughout the internet. I've been seeing it on Reddit and Twitter, and obviously on YouTube itself. So just be careful. That's all I'm saying. This is the popular video right now, and it goes throughout the community, and everyone knows about it, and everyone just takes it by fact. Please keep doing your own research if you're really interested in this topic. Oh, he's almost at 1 million subscribers. Definitely go check him out if you've never heard of this channel. He deserves it. Big thanks to my patrons this month. The Jewish Autonomous Oblast only has 0.6% of Jewish population left. It's pronounced Tour de Siyaz Drew. Whitegrape of the Pirates. Samuel Walker. LoreTrack. William. Scientific Soulist. Nolan. NordTyrol. Miglu the Goat. KingBearHaze. Connor Pavlik. Fredrik Tibblin. Never change Drew unless you want to. LuxembourgLover.